Welcome to our deep dive. We're tackling psychodiagnostics today, and wow, this textbook, just the intro, it's like, I don't know, making you rethink what it even means to understand people.
Yeah, it goes way beyond just like quizzes and scores, right?
Yeah, okay, so before we get too deep,
Mm.
can we just lay some groundwork? Like, what is psychodiagnostics?
Um, well, think about it as like a whole process
Right.
of gathering information
Hmm.
to try to really paint a picture of how someone's like psychology is working.
Like,
Tests are just one part of that.
right.
A really skilled professional has to look at the whole picture, not just like
Right.
the numbers.
Yeah, it's like, that makes me think of that case. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, Phineas Gage.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Just like, the railroad worker.
Yeah.
A metal rod went through his skull, and
More, yeah.
they could see the physical damage, but his personality changed after. And that's what really showed. Like, oh, there's a connection between brain and behavior.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that case, like, really blew the field wide open in terms of, like,
Yeah.
understanding the frontal lobe and
Yeah.
personality and all that.
And I guess we've come a long way since then. But
Oh, yeah, for sure.
but that idea is still there,
Kinda like-
gathering information in a really systematic way to be able to, like, understand what's going on.
Yes, and to make informed decisions based on that.
So we're talking about everything from, like, cognitive strengths
Yep,
to, like, why someone acts a certain way.
all of that, yeah.
I'm already seeing this is way more complicated than I thought.
It can be, but it's fascinating, too.
Totally. But okay, I got to ask. You've used the word testing, assessment,
Yes.
and then clinical practice.
Right.
Those are all kind of different things.
They are. Sometimes people use them interchangeably, but there are some distinctions.
Okay.
Testing is just one part of assessment.
Okay.
Assessment is like bigger, trying to get the whole picture of the person. And then clinical practice is taking that assessment
Right.
and actually using it
Okay.
to make decisions about treatment or what interventions to use.
So it's like building a case file.
Ooh, I like that.
But instead of solving a crime, we're trying to understand the person.
Right, right.
Yeah. It's fascinating. And even though, like, clinical psychology has kind of shifted more towards therapy,
For sure.
I'm surprised to hear that over 85% of clinical psychologists still use testing regularly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that's still a really big
A
part.
foundational, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess it goes back to that idea of seeing the whole person.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that psychodiagnostics has two big domains, right?
Yes.
Performance and personality.
Mhm.
Can you break those down for me?
Of course. So, performance is about what someone can do, their abilities and things like memory, sensory skills, intelligence.
Right.
If you think about like the Wechsler scales, those are like the classic IQ tests, right? They try to get at those cognitive skills, but intelligence itself is so much more
Right.
than just, you know.
Yeah, it's not like some people are smart and others aren't. They're different types.
Exactly.
And those tests only get at a piece of it, right?
All right. It's more like a snapshot.
What about personality then?
Oh, that's a fun one.
Because how do you even, like, measure that?
Well, there are lots of ways, but one really well-known one is called the Big Five. Have you heard of that?
I think so. I'm not sure I remember what they are, though.
It looks at 5 main traits: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Okay, I vaguely remember that now.
Yeah, and you can imagine how, like, if you're high in extroversion,
Right.
you might be very different in social situations than someone who's more introverted.
Totally. But it's not just about, like, slapping a label on someone.
Right.
It's about understanding how those traits actually play out.
Absolutely. It's about how they influence their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Okay, so we've got performance.
Mm.
We've got personality.
Yep.
How does this all actually get measured?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. There are 10 main data sources that psychodiagnostics draws on.
10.
10.
Okay, well, let's start with the first one. What was it called? Actuarial data.
It's actually actuarial and biographical.
Okay.
It might sound kind of boring, but it's really important context.
Mm-hmm.
Things like someone's educational background, their work history, medical records, that stuff really matters.
Right.
Like, imagine someone's struggling in school.
Okay.
Well, their educational history might explain why,
So it's about piecing together their life story
in a way.
to see how they got to where they are now.
It helps us understand the whole person, right?
Okay, what's next on this list?
Okay, this one's kind of cool. It's called behavior trace.
Behavior trace.
Yeah, and it's like almost detective work.
Okay.
It's about looking for clues in the traces someone leaves behind through their behavior.
Yeah.
Like, what can we learn from the handwriting?
Oh, interesting.
Or a messy room? Or even bitten fingernails?
That is really interesting. It makes you wonder, like,
Yeah.
what are the stories that we're telling without realizing it?
Right. What are those everyday actions revealing?
I mean, I've heard that you can analyze handwriting to understand personality.
Yeah, I've probably heard of graphology.
Yeah, but does that actually hold up scientifically?
It's a little shaky, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
The research hasn't really supported it.
Okay.
But I think even those things, like graphology, can still give us insights, especially when we combine them
Right.
with other
Like
sources.
the whole picture, yeah.
Yeah, it's about looking for patterns and getting a fuller understanding.
Okay, so we've got the background information.
Yeah.
We've got the clues, the traces.
The behavioral traces.
Yeah. What other ways are there to kind of observe and gather data?
Well, there's actually just straight up observation,
Right.
watching someone in a natural setting.
Makes sense.
Like, think about a kid on a playground
Mm-hmm.
or an employee in their workplace. You can learn a lot more from just seeing them in action.
Right, because it's more natural
Absolutely.
than like a stuffy testing room.
And they might be more likely to act like their true selves, too.
Makes sense.
And then there's also behavior ratings.
Behavior ratings.
Yeah. So this is where we get input from other people,
Yeah.
like people who know the individual well,
Okay.
and we ask them to evaluate the person's behavior.
Okay, so you're getting like,
Multiple perspectives.
yeah, like witnesses to an event,
That's a great way to think about it.
all with their own kind of view.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, this is fascinating. What else do we have in this toolbox of ours?
Well, another one is expressive behavior.
Expressive behavior.
Yeah, so this is focusing on how someone moves, talks, expresses their emotions.
So like facial expressions, body language.
All of that.
That's something we all kind of do naturally though, right?
We do. We're always reading people's body language to understand them better, even if we don't realize it.
And while it's not like an exact science, it can give you a lot of information.
Totally, especially when it's combined with those other sources.
Right, right. Okay, so we're building up quite the picture here.
We are.
What's next?
Okay, now this one gets a little trickier, maybe even controversial.
Ooh, I like controversial.
Projective technique.
Projective techniques. Okay, tell me more.
They aim to tap into the unconscious.
The unconscious.
Yeah, like thoughts and feelings that the person themselves might not even be aware of.
Okay.
Probably the most famous example is the Rorschach ink blot test.
Ah, yes. The ink blots.
Everyone's heard of those.
They've always intrigued me. Like, how do they even work?
The idea is that by asking someone what they see in these, like, totally ambiguous pictures,
Right, the ink blots, yeah.
yeah, we can get a glimpse into their motivations, anxieties, how they see the world, you know.
And are they accurate?
Well, that's the debate, right?
Right.
Like, the science is a bit iffy on that. There's been a lot of criticism.
Okay.
And the way you interpret them can be really subjective.
So it depends a lot on the skill of the person giving the test,
Yeah.
right?
And
And their experience.
huge factor.
Okay, okay. What else is there?
Next up, we've got interviews.
Interviews.
But these aren't just like casual chats, you know?
Yeah, because you can't just chat with someone and know all about their cytology.
Right. These are specifically designed to
Oh, is it?
gather information, especially in clinical settings.
And are there different types of interviews?
Oh, yeah, there are. There are structured interviews, semi-structured,
Okay.
and unstructured.
So tell me about those.
Well, like in a structured interview, the clinician follows a very specific set of questions,
Mm-hmm.
and that's good for consistency and for comparing different people.
Okay.
Semi-structured, you have more flexibility.
Okay.
You can kind of go off script and explore stuff that comes up.
Right.
And unstructured interviews are even more open.
So it's like a guided conversation almost.
Yeah, exactly. And each type has its own strengths and weaknesses depending on what you're trying to assess.
Right. Depends what you need to get out of it.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we've got interviews. That's number what?
I
6.
think we're at 7 now.
7. Okay. What's next?
Questionnaires.
Oh, questionnaires. We all know and love those.
We've all taken them. Those personality quizzes online.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And those, interest surveys,
Right.
all that kind of stuff.
But how accurate are they, really?
That's a big question, isn't it?
Because, like, can you really understand a whole person from a multiple choice test?
Yeah, it's a valid concern. The thing is, they often reveal more about how a person sees themselves,
Okay.
which might not always match up with reality.
Right, because we all want to present ourselves in a certain way,
Exactly. And people tend to answer in a way that, makes them look good.
which can throw things off a bit.
Definitely. So it's important to, take those results with a grain of salt,
Right, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. Not the whole picture.
What else have we got?
2 more.
2 more. Okay, lay 'em on me.
All right, next up are objective tests.
Objective tests.
These are the ones that are designed for, like, really rigorous measurement,
Right.
like specific abilities or traits.
Right.
They're kind of like the gold standard.
So they're the most, like, reliable and valid.
They aim to be, yes.
Okay.
Because they're carefully designed and standardized. Think of intelligence tests or aptitude tests, that
That's
sort
okay.
of thing.
So this is where we get the, like, hard data.
Yeah, the numbers you can compare and analyze.
Okay, and the last one.
The grand finale.
Drum roll, please.
This one is psychophysiological data.
Psychophysiological. Wow. Okay, break that down for me.
This is where we get into measuring things like brain activity,
Okay.
heart rate,
Yeah.
other physiological responses.
So we're talking brain scans and stuff.
Yeah, things like fMRI, which shows what's happening in the brain.
Wow.
It's a really exciting area.
It's like we're seeing the physical side of the psychological almost.
We are. It's fascinating to see how our bodies react and how that connects to our thoughts and feelings and actions.
It's blowing my mind a little bit, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
So we've got these 10 different sources.
Yeah, quite the collection, right?
Yeah. And each one gives us a slightly different view.
They each offer a unique piece of the puzzle.
But how does it all come together in practice?
Well, that's what we're going to explore next.
Okay, lead away. I'm ready to dive deeper into this world of psychodiagnostics and see how it's actually used to help people.
Let's do it. It's amazing, like, how many areas psychodiagnostics touches on, you know?
Right, yeah. Like we've talked about clinical settings, obviously, but you mentioned intelligence and aptitudes, career choices,
Oh, yeah.
even assessing brain injuries. Like, wow.
It really gets around.
Okay, let's unpack some of that. So intelligence and aptitudes, I think a lot of people still have that like stuck in their head that it's just about IQ.
Right, that one number.
Yeah.
But it's so much more nuanced.
Okay, so break that down for me.
Well, like, we're moving away from just that single score. Okay.
And recognizing that there are all these types of intelligence.
Okay.
Like you might have strong verbal intelligence.
Right.
Or spatial or emotional.
Right.
And then there are aptitudes. Like,
Right.
are you musically talented? Are you a good problem solver?
So it's not about just saying someone IS or isn't intelligent.
Exactly.
It's about understanding of their profile.
Yes, and that's like huge for education.
Right. How so?
Well, if you know a kid's strengths and weaknesses,
Right.
you can tailor their learning to what they need.
Oh, that's like personalized learning,
Hold on.
but like on a deeper level.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the clinical side of things then?
Oh, that's crucial. Not just for diagnosis, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you want to figure out if someone has, say, anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also for understanding their strengths and their challenges.
Okay.
That helps guide therapy.
So like it's not just putting a label on them.
No.
It's about understanding why they're struggling. Yeah, and how they can grow.
Okay. It's a more holistic approach.
Yeah, yeah. And that makes me think of like career counseling.
Oh, vocational guidance.
Yeah.
That's a huge application.
Because like, how do you know what career to pick?
Right. Well, assessments can help figure out your talents, interests, even personality traits.
Okay.
And then you can connect those.
To jobs that might fit.
Exactly.
Mm.
Like if someone's super conscientious and they love working with data,
Right.
maybe accounting or data analysis would be a good fit.
It's like finding a job that you're not just good at,
Mhm.
but one that will make you happy.
Yes, that's the goal.
Yeah, totally. And it takes out the guesswork.
So much of it. We can also assess their work style, you know.
Well, interesting.
Like, do they prefer to work alone or in teams? What's their communication style like?
Yeah.
Even their leadership potential?
So it's like we're building this whole like psychological blueprint.
Right away. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What are some other areas where that kind of understanding is really important? Well, neuropsychology is one that's getting more and more attention, especially when it comes to brain injuries.
Brain injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just diagnosing the injury itself.
No.
It's understanding, like, what changed cognitively.
Yes. Cognitive function, memory, language skills, emotional changes, behavior.
Wow.
Neuropsychologists use all those tools we talked about. Tests, interviews, observations to evaluate all of that.
It's really detailed work, I imagine.
It is, because sometimes the effects are subtle.
Right.
They might not show up on a scan.
So they're really piecing together this puzzle
Exactly.
to see how the injury has affected the whole person.
It requires a lot of specialized knowledge
Yeah.
to be able to make sense of it all.
And what about things like learning disabilities?
Oh, that's another big one. That's often how they're identified.
So, again, not just labeling,
No.
but understanding, like, where the challenges are.
What are they struggling with? Reading, math, attention, and then you can figure out the best way to help them.
So it's about giving them the tools they need to succeed.
That's the whole point, right?
Yeah, and that's so important.
Okay, what else?
Well, there's also forensic psychology.
Ooh, forensic psychology.
That's where things get a little more,
Intense.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I think of like criminal profiling and all that.
Well, the media likes to play that up, you know?
Right.
But forensic psychologists do really important work in the legal system.
So what do they actually do?
They might evaluate a defendant's competency to stand trial, for example,
Okay.
or assess the risk of them reoffending.
Wow, that's some high-stakes stuff.
It is, and it requires a deep understanding of both psychology and the law.
Because, like, you're dealing with people's lives, basically.
You are.
Yeah.
And often you're working with incomplete information.
So it's like being a detective, almost.
Yeah, a psychological
You're
detective.
trying to understand what happened.
Their motivations, their behavior.
That's really fascinating. But also, like, it makes me think about ethics.
Oh, that's huge. Because we're talking about really sensitive information.
We are.
Yeah.
Ethical considerations are, like, paramount in this whole field.
Okay, so what are some of those key principles?
Well, informed consent is huge. The person being assessed has to understand what's happening,
Right.
what the purpose is, how the results will be used.
So it's not like they're just a subject in an experiment.
No, they have rights.
Right. They have to be able to say no.
Exactly. And confidentiality is also crucial.
Okay.
What's shared during an assessment is super private,
Right.
and it can only be shared with very specific people.
So it's not like those movie scenes where therapists are gossiping about their patients.
Oh, definitely not.
Okay, good.
We're bound by ethical codes and legal regulations, you know.
So that confidentiality is really important for building trust, right?
It's foundational.
Okay. And then there's the issue of culture, right?
Yes. Cultural
Yes.
sensitivity is so important.
Because people from different backgrounds
Mm-hmm.
might express themselves differently or have different ideas about mental health.
All of that.
So you can't just use the same approach for everyone.
No, one size fits all doesn't work here.
Yeah, you have to adapt.
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of expertise, who can actually do this kind of work? It's obviously very specialized.
It is. It takes years of training.
So if I was looking for an evaluation,
Mm-hmm.
what should I look for?
Credentials, for sure. Licensure, are they allowed to practice in your area?
Okay.
And ask about their experience.
Mhm.
What do they specialize in? Kids, adults, couples, specific conditions.
So it's like finding the right specialist for any health concern, basically.
It's very similar.
Okay, that's good advice.
Mm-hmm.
But looking ahead now,
Mm-hmm.
what's on the horizon for psychodiagnostics? What's exciting you?
Well, it's a field that's always changing,
Right?
and technology is playing a huge role.
Oh, yeah, technology. It's changing everything these days.
It really is. We're seeing online assessments being developed,
Okay.
virtual reality simulations for therapy, even AI applications.
And psychodiagnostics.
Yeah, it's early days,
Okay.
but the potential is huge. Imagine, like, AI that personalizes the assessment as you're taking it,
Whoa.
adjusting the questions based on your answers,
That's incredible.
or AI that analyzes massive amounts of data from assessments
Okay.
and finds patterns that humans might miss
So it's like this tool that can help clinicians be more efficient.
and more precise.
But also, I guess you have to be careful with it.
All right, absolutely. The ethical implications are huge. Human oversight has to be there.
Yeah, you can't just let the robots take over.
Exactly. It's a tool. It's not a replacement.
Right. What else is exciting you about the future of this field?
The connection with neuroscience.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned brain scans before.
It's amazing what we can see now.
Yeah, literally seeing what's happening in the brain.
And we're learning so much about how that connects to behavior,
Okay.
emotions, mental health.
It's like opening up a whole new window into the mind.
It really is. And it's leading to new treatments, new ways to personalize care.
Wow.
It's a really exciting time.
Yeah, it sounds like it. This whole deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of this stuff.
I'm so glad to hear that.
And I'm sure our listeners do too.
I hope so.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been exploring the world of psychodiagnostics, how it goes way beyond just tests to understand the whole person.
It really is about using all those different data sources, 10 of them,
Right, from background information to brain scans.
to create this, like, complete picture of how their psychology is working.
It's fascinating. And we've talked about how it's applied in so many areas.
From education to therapy to the legal system, yeah.
But I have to ask, no system's perfect.
Yeah.
Are there limitations to psychodiagnostics.
Oh, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, we're making judgments about people.
Right.
And people are complicated,
Yeah.
unpredictable.
So there's always that element of uncertainty.
There is. We can gather all the data, analyze it carefully, but we can't ever be 100% sure. Right. Our conclusions are completely true.
It's not like a math problem with one right answer.
Exactly. It's more about probabilities, possibilities.
So it's about using good judgment,
Mm,
your expertise,
for sure.
and really understanding the individual.
Yeah, and knowing that there's always more to learn.
Okay. Are there other limitations we should be aware of?
Well, think about it. An assessment can be influenced by all sorts of things.
Right.
We've mentioned culture, language, but even someone's mood on that day
Right, that makes sense.
can change how they respond.
So it's like trying to hit a moving target almost.
It kind of is. People are dynamic.
Yeah.
They're always changing.
It makes it even harder, right?
It does. That's why the clinician's role is so crucial.
Okay, explain that.
It's not just about giving tests.
Hmm.
It's about using your judgment, your training,
Okay.
your empathy.
Right. Seeing the whole,
Presence of it all.
they're like, I don't know, detectives almost.
I like
They're
it.
trying to solve this mystery of like, who is this person?
Right, but also being aware that you
Yeah.
don't always have all the pieces.
And you can't jump to conclusions.
Exactly.
It's about like respecting the individual.
Always. That's paramount.
Okay, so we've talked about the power of psychodiagnostics,
Mm-hmm.
but also the need to be careful with it,
Absolutely.
responsible.
Ethical. And I think that's even more important as the field keeps changing.
Right, like with new technology and all that.
We have to be mindful of both the possibilities and the limits.
That's a great point. Psychodiagnostics can really make a difference,
It can.
but it's not magic.
No.
It's complex. It requires expertise.
And it always has to be used ethically.
Well said. I think that's a perfect takeaway for our listeners.
I agree.
This deep dive into psychodiagnostics has been, I don't know, eye-opening for me.
I'm so glad.
And I hope it's inspired our listeners to learn even more.
There's so much to explore out there.
So keep reading, keep asking questions.
And keep talking about this stuff.
Because it's really about understanding ourselves and each other, isn't it?
It is. It's about recognizing how amazing the human mind is.
Well said. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep connecting.